trained here, FAA inspector. He just retired in October last year. You know, he said, yeah, you gave me my first aviation job in general aviation when I was chief here. I said, really? I didn't realize that. Cool. He was a backseater of some fighter jet in the Navy. So he had an aviation job before, civil aviation. So anyway, we'll go to the lazy 8. Now the lazy 8 is a finesse maneuver. Finesse. We still know what the goal is as we're doing the maneuver, but it's a maneuver where if you're working hard at it, you're doing it wrong. It's not a hard maneuver once you learn how to do it. Because with finesse, you learn to guide the airplane and put it in a position where it wants to do what you want it to do. So you don't have to force it. If you find yourself forcing things, then you're not doing a very good lazy 8. So if we read the FCTM procedures, it says enter the maneuver at 95 knots. And from there, we don't change the power. The power is constant. So take your hand off the throttle. Don't rest your hand on the throttle. If you do, you'll probably unintentionally change it. Set the power, 95 knots, level flight, and then boom, you're done with the power levers. And then you'll have to pick out your reference points. You gotta have your 90 still, but you need a 45 and a 135 as well. And it goes over all the procedures in that, which is fine. "95 knots, I'm all trimmed. From this point, I don't change the power, I don't change the trim. 90-degree reference point, 45, 135. I've beaten the 90. You're still going to start increasing the pitch and the bank smoothly, maintaining coordination. You want to reach the 45-degree point at the maximum pitch attitude, and about half the bank you're planning on having at the 90. So around 15 if you're going to be around 30, around 20 if you're going to be around 40. And from the 45 to the 90, you're continuing to increase the bank, but the pitch begins to come down. So as to arrive at that 90-degree point with maximum bank and the pitch going through the horizon. That's going to be your minimum speed and your maximum altitude. Note what it is, because we are looking for symmetry. So what is my speed and altitude? As it continues, the pitch is coming down to the 135 as the bank comes out smoothly. So as to reach the 135, your maximum nose down pitch attitude and about half your bank angle again. From the 135, the pitch comes up smoothly as you're rolling the wings out, the bank out, to arrive at your 180-degree point of the turn, entry airspeed, entry altitude, and 180 degrees of heading change. Take a breath, and now we're going to go to in the other direction. The 135 point becomes the 45. We want to be at the same attitude and bank as we have on the other side. Increasing the bank, the pitch is coming down through the horizon at the 90, coming down, 45 becomes the 135. Looks the same as it did on the other end of it, and then pitch is coming back up as we're leveling off at the altitude, the bank's out, and the maneuver is over. Coordination, orientation, planning. Those are the grading criteria. Not necessarily exactly a pitch or a bank, because even the ACS says approximately, doesn't it? Approximately. So, you know, it's about orientation. Now, when you first learning the maneuver, it's mechanical. And it has to be mechanical because you're learning different pictures all the way around, and you're actually flying and trying to get information. But as you get better and better, then it's not so much mechanical, and you're just guiding the airplane around to meet those pictures as you do it. Not having to work at it, and just back around again. So, what are some of the challenges you have with the Lazy 8?
Picking the visual references.
Picking the visual references, okay? Because there are not a lot of good ones out here, are there?
No.
No, there are not a lot of good ones. But, you still gotta pick something, you know? I often hear people say, 45, you see that brown field over there? I say, yeah, okay. I'll act like I do. Yeah, that's not gonna work very well. And in all honesty, I see a lot of people, they tend to use the heading indicator. You know, and I'll see them put their heading bug on different places and all that. It's not an instrument maneuver. That's not an instrument maneuver.
Something I had a lot of trouble with Lazy 8's. I had a lot of repeat lessons in Column 3 and CF5. What actually led me to the breakthrough was imagining, you know, because we have the grid pattern out there, imagining our 45-degree point, just a halfway point between those two grids.
That's exactly right. That's an added orientation aid.
So yeah, I would say, oh yeah, I'm using that point out there and that point out there.
But then on your check ride, the clouds are too low out there and you end up over the water.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I agree with you. If I can do a Lazy 8 out there to the west, that's where I'm gonna do it. If I have to do it over the water, it's much more challenging.
Yeah.
Still the same maneuver though. Still the same maneuver. What else?
Anything on the right airspeed?
Okay. Right airspeed.
I always came out fast.
For me, it was like keeping the pitch and bank constant, like the movement, because I would just get stuck on one thing and focusing on the other, and smoothly trying to keep it.
Yeah, like I said, initially it's a mechanical maneuver,
Yeah.
so that you begin to notice what you're looking for at each step, but then connecting the dots smoothly. Got to connect the dots smoothly. And once you connect the dots smoothly, then it ends up a little bit better all the way around. Now, if you don't get the proper power setting at the beginning, that makes it very difficult. You know, if you consistently end up high and fast or low and slow, you know it's a power problem. It's not a pitch problem or a bank problem. It's a power problem. So, you know, I've seen sometimes people get in a little bit too big of a hurry to get the maneuver started, and they just pick out a number and set it and start. And if you happen to pick out the wrong one, it's going to be almost impossible to end up exactly where you want to be. So you got to take the time to make sure you know what power setting is going to stabilize you at that 95 knots in level flight before you start. Because power is fixed, so not having the right one. So yeah, there's a lot of challenges. It takes a lot of practice to get it right. A lot of practice, a lot of time. Now, one of the things that I have noticed with many pilots, even after they've been doing it a little while, they'll get in here and they'll do the maneuver, and they're coming around, and they get here, and they're already at airspeed and altitude, but they still got another 30 degrees of heading change to do. So they just make a level turn like nobody will notice, right? And then you go in the other direction, and it's a little better. I only came up about 20 or 25 degrees short, and I just had less level turn to finish up. Well, that's not a good Lazy 8. But why did it happen? two things that you have to look at as they're doing it. And one of the problems is, I think, easier to fix than the other one. But the first thing I want to watch for and correct if necessary, a lot of times the pilots remember as the pitch is coming up, they push on that right rudder, but as it's coming down, they forget to let go of it. So as they're finishing, they're kind of turning to the left with that aileron and holding it back a little bit with the right rudder. And then that's why they're having a problem getting finished. And then as they're going the other direction, that rudder is helping them. So that's why it usually ends up, oh, it's a little better on the one to the right. So that is a problem you probably want to fix first. That's the easier one to fix. The second one is what was already mentioned, is that 45-degree point. 45-degree point. Because they say, you see that brown field out there, that's my 45-degree reference. Okay. Can you see that brown field? You can't see that brown field. What's the likelihood of you being exactly in the right position if you're just using that brown field? You know, we don't always have clear blue skies. Like this morning, I think it was pretty nice with that cold front that went through, cleaned things out pretty well. But if you're looking at 45, and you've got that brown field or whatever it is out there, and you look up, is there anything I can use right there that'll help me better identify where I'm at the 45? Okay? That may help, and maybe they'll get a little bit better. It may get to the point where you end up just telling them, look, I'm gonna help you a little bit here, because I've demonstrated it again. I want you to look at the pictures, but they're still having some difficulties. I want you to keep your pitch coming in, and I'll tell you when you're at your 45 tomorrow.
Yeah, share can start with me.
With a mosquito. Okay? So they may come up here and think they're at the 45, and I say, no, you're not there yet. Keep pitching. And now you're at the 45, and now you can increase your bank and the nose comes down. Help them develop the pictures to get the right outcome. You know, because you can't keep making the same error and expect it to get better. At least make a new error, right? If you mess up, make a big adjustment. See the result. So then you've got a little bit more to play it. You know? Like if you want to learn how to drive a car real fast around a turn, how do you know how fast you can go? And you go too fast when you spin out, right? But you don't know until you spin out that you went too fast. So you explore the envelope. I took the class, I spun out twice. And I found the limit. It was good because it was a course set up for training, so I didn't hit anything. It was fun. It was fun. I like driving fast, especially on a course. But anyway, that if you get that first 45 row, your maneuver's a mess from there because you're always fighting it to make it look right. Get the 45 right, you got a much better chance of having an easier time making the whole thing come around. So just work at that, and when somebody works out incorrectly, help them make an adjustment so you can make it better. And again, as was spoken, you know, you can use the grid pattern out there. It's not ground reference, but if it looks like this when you start, it's going to look something like this at a 45. It'll look something like this at a 90. It'll look something like this at a 135. It'll look something like that at the 180 degree of the turn. Which line it is irrelevant. It's not an S turn across the road like that book says now. It's crazy. But it's still it's an added piece of orientation information. Okay? So use what you got. Now, like I said, you know, you've been practicing that. Now it's check ride day, and the clouds are 1,500 feet out there in Charlotte and Delta. Yeah, can't do a lazy 8. Can't do a lazy 8 out there. So now No grid. No grid. And to add to that, the coastline does not run north and south. It's not north and south, it's northwest, southeast. So people have a hard time sometimes figuring out, well, what am I going to use as a reference now? What am I going to use as a reference? Now, if they tell me, you see that cloud out there? That's about 45, and that cloud? No, I'm not going to do that. I don't have a clue which cloud you're talking about, and it'll change by the time you get your second one done anyway. They're not going to do that. So you're out here over the water, and you've got a choice to make. Well, you can still see out in the distance, and you can see some east-west lines out there. If you want to have a little bit of that for orientation, and say that, okay, I'll start out like this, because you want to be far enough over the water so you finish by the time you get to the coastline, because that's where the practice area ends. So you pick out that and say, okay, well, I'm kind of using that line, that point out there that's perpendicular to this line for my 90-degree reference, and then you'll pick out something maybe along the coast, maybe inland. There's the 45, there's 135 and all that, and start doing the maneuver. And that coastline is very strong draw. And sometimes it's hard to overcome the visual of wanting to be kind of lined up with that shoreline when you finish up, as opposed to ending up like that, references shoreline. It's a very, for visually, it's kind of challenging to overcome that. So another way is why isn't that coming?
So it's like a circle feature, so you can circle all of it.
So you could start your maneuver out and say, I'm going to have my longitudinal axis. I'm not going to fight it. I'm going to start with my longitudinal axis parallel to the coastline. Now visually, when I'm at my 90-degree point, I'll be facing the coastline and be pretty much perpendicular to the coastline. And when I finish, I'll be parallel to the coastline again. And then I'll have my 135 and my 45-degree reference points out there to use for that information, for those points. I go ahead and use that as opposed to fighting the coastline. No, I'll just go ahead and I surrender. I'll use it. I'll use it. Because it's a very strong draw. Just like Route 60 when you're trying on the downwind of 1-2 right. I mean, it's a strong draw. You have to fight. Okay? So, there's some things about that. Now, here's another question, and it's a very important thing to make sure the pilots understand. Why is this called a lazy 8? Where's the 8? I see an S on the ground. I see some ups and downs, and the picture kind of looks like a what do they call the thing like for the skateboard?
Half pipe.
Half pipe. Kind of, I see that. But where's the 8?
As I understand it, if you were to put a piece of paper and surround the airplane with it, and put a marker at the tip of the nose, as you go through the maneuver, so we start pitching up here, we come and then we come down, and then we do it the other way, that should create an 8 for us, just based off the tip of the nose. And now this paper is surrounding the airplane, but if you laid it flat, it would appear to be an 8.
You're close to half right.
Okay, close to half right.
You're close to half right. I'll give you half.
Okay.
You know, the person who wrote this book on lazy 8's, pages of lazy 8, they made a good attempt at explaining it. They did. They made a good attempt at explaining it on page 10-6. But I prefer to draw a picture, you know, and it's 180 degrees of the horizon. So if you have that paper, it's just 180 degrees, not all around the airplane.
Is that the half I got around? Or
That's right.
okay,
Okay.
that's pretty good.
But now we got to get the rest done, you know, because here's the horizon. Well, let's start first of all with an 8. Here's an 8, correct? Here's an 8 laying down. It's lazy. So we're drawing a figure that looks like an 8 laying down. It's lazy. It's got nothing to do with how fast we do a maneuver, how slow we maneuver. It's just that the track is of an 8 laying down. So then you got to figure out, well, where do I see that from the cockpit? Because it is important that we see it from the cockpit. So here's the horizon. There's the 8 on the horizon, laying down. So as was said, if we had a marker on our longitudinal axis and we were to draw it on the 180 degrees of the horizon that we do this maneuver on, we would see the pitch coming up, pitch coming down through the horizon at the 90, and then down to the 135, then back up again as we're leveling off. And then as we go in the opposite direction, it comes back up again above the horizon to the 45, back through the horizon at the 90, down again at the 135, and then back up again as we're leveling off at the 180. Okay? That's the lazy 8. And if you don't know exactly what you're looking for, it's harder to make it work. So if I'm starting this maneuver off with a left turn, this would be the start. This would be the 45-degree point. This would be the 90. This would be the 135. There's the 180. Then as I then go to the right, the 135 becomes the 45. The 90 is the same. 45 becomes the 135, and then I'm back again. So if you know that's what you're looking for out the front window, you've got a better chance of making it happen. One of the issues I have with the ACS is the ACS just says, well, let's read it. Commercial ACS. Lazy 8. Page 46. Alright, select your altitude so it's going to be performed in conflict with no more than 1,500 feet ADL. Complete the maneuver in accordance with the following: approximately 30 degrees of bank at the steepest, constant change of pitch and roll rate, airspeed, altitude at the 180 degree point, plus or minus 100 feet of entry altitude, and speed plus or minus 10 knots, and heading plus or minus 10 degrees. Continue the maneuver through the number of symmetrical loops specified. Excuse me, it's a lazy 8. To get an 8, there's 2. That's kind of weird. And I wrote that up because they've come out with the draft of the new ACS for a flight instructor, and they sent it out for comment. said a lazy 8 isn't some specified number, it's 2. What is this specified number thing? So as you read that ACS, it only focuses for grading purposes on the 180 degrees of a turn. Well, that's kind of silly. You know,